All right. So I know I don't necessarily look like it, but I'm a successful fighter. Now I haven't done MMA. I haven't done very well in my point-based sparring matches, where a technical hit counts as a point. But in every serious fight I've been in, I've basically won. Now, this video is going to be called an annoying warrior's wisdom, because sometimes I get the feeling that people don't necessarily think too highly of me and so on. But I've done some things, and I don't mean just bad things or something like that, but I've done things that are like, that's kind of impressive. You know, like for instance, I'll give a list of things I've done and then kind of meander into my thoughts after I give my credentials as a fighting man who's successful at fighting when he needs to be physically. There was a pit bull that attacked me, and I managed to kick it twice in the face, really hard, and it backed off, and it didn't know what to do after that. And I walked by it, basically, after it attacked me for walking on the sidewalk. There was a time when I chased a black bear, and I know that's relatively easy compared to a grizzly, for instance. But at the same time, black bears are bigger than me, so that's another point in my bravado. A black bear once entered the yard with where my cousins were, and I basically stood between the black bear and shooed my cousins into the house and so on. And I was deadly prepared to run towards an axe. So I was about here, there's an axe about here, and there was a black bear here. So I was deadly prepared to run towards the axe, towards the bear sort of, but mostly towards the axe in a triangle fashion, so that I could wield it against the bear if it attacked or moved in our direction much. While I was conducting my cousins into the house that we were near and so on for their safety. I have taken down 3 people within the span of about 2 minutes tops before. And there was another time when there was 2 people and I basically bashed their heads in over the course of 5 or 10 minutes when I was untrained, but just myself, and without much fighting experience or anything like that, and succeeded at beating both of them and so on, to the point that they were terrorized by my presence, and the possibility that I would continue aggression or fighting, because they knew that both of them combined weren't good enough to beat me or not lose against me. So I've got a few I've got a few wins under my belt and so on. Yeah, and there's another one which happened sort of about 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. I think 6 years ago. Or no, 7 years ago. No, 6 years ago. Where there was a meth head that was bigger than me, and he just told me he could beat me up, and I couldn't fight back because I wasn't allowed to. And this is kind of a interesting position to take, and I just leaned in and said, "I'm not afraid of you." And he headbutted me, and he got the best of it. You know, my head was split open basically, and his wasn't. So I was bleeding like crazy. Not necessarily a point in my physical toughness necessarily, although maybe it's just the manner by which the head's hit. But my head split open right about here, skin-wise, and I started bleeding like crazy. And in fact, I think you can actually see the sort of the scar to this day, right here, on camera even. It's that obvious. Anyways, So I was bleeding like crazy. So all of a sudden from the head, you know, and he gets about 3 punches on me while I'm blocking them and stuff like that. And then I wrestle him to the ground, slam his head into the concrete, punch him in the face a couple times for trying to bite me in the leg as I pinned him. And then I just sort of like grabbed him by the neck, sort of like by the shirt or something, or whatever, and basically shouted at him that what he did was assault and that's illegal and he's going to jail and so on, while purposefully bleeding from my head wound onto his face. Now, when I let him up, he bolted like the wind. Like he went just full on terrified, flee for your life. You know, and he was tweaking on methamphetamine and he was bigger than me. So basically what I'm saying is I'm a tough bastard. Yeah. It's not just the self-deletion attempts and so on that I've survived. It's the fights I've been in and dominated in as well. 46 self-deletion attempts, 10 were poison. Like 7 of the poison attempts were a full bottle of Tylenol within the space of an hour. 35 times with razor blades and knives. You know, in all sorts of positions in my body. I've shown my scars before. I've talked about it and so on. So you can look up one of my third or fourth video total on this platform, on this channel, and like that's just what I'm talking about to some extent in that video. Yeah. So basically, I'm establishing my credentials here, right? Like I've been through a lot, and I've won a lot of fights. Now, I'm not here to talk about fighting as like a how to do it better thing in this video, at least. I'm not sure how to train anyone necessarily other than to spar with them for how I learned to spar with a friend, basically, when we were young and Dragon Ball Z enthusiasts. And really going at it with no safety rules whatsoever, basically, except once you fall down, let the guy get back up. Like literally no rules, basically. So that's how we learned to fight. That's my suggestion, in a way, is let anything happen that you can't prevent from happening to you, and do what you can to the enemy. Like a real dangerous fighting. But wow, you learn quickly, or you learn really well eventually through the real deal, because you're fighting exactly like you're sparring exactly like you would actually fight, basically. And maybe there's 4 rules: no groin shots, no fish hooking, which is when you put your finger and you put it into their mouth and you tear at their lip, no eye gouges, and no ramming the cartilage of the nose up into the brain to kill them. Like those 4 rules. Like if you get a broken arm, you got a broken arm because you deserved it, kind of thing. Even is kind of how we approached it. So I never fought against an MMA champion, but I have a certain degree of appreciation for real fighting. Anyways, one of the things I've noticed is actually, I'm going to give a song shout out first. There's a Endless Taverns AI generated song. At least the singing itself and the instrumentals are AI generated, and I think the lyrics are human written. But they might be AI generated as well. I don't know. But it's a good song called Versed in Violence. Not verses in violence, but versed in violence. And that's VERSED, which means like to speak, basically. And that is now one of my favorite new songs, basically. Because that's a philosophy and countless scars. What can I say? That's kind of my vibe right now with my personal history and so on. Okay, I'm bragging a lot and I'm reminiscing and I'm like rambling and stuff like that. But like, if you've been born with me a little bit, hear me out. I'm probably the kind of person that annoys a lot of people, which is why no one really cares what I think. Um, but the thing is, my beliefs are real. They're functional. They're based on real experience. Um, like in the past, I've been woke, like very woke, like very Marxist, like 90% of the way Marxist and woke in the modern era as we know it today. Just a little bit 10% different, and that 10% was the wedge in the door that got me away from woke more and more as time progressed and reality asserted itself. And I realized the woke were more and more evil and so on. The only reason why I went with woke in the first place is because I thought they were actually the good guys because they were talking about ending forever wars, freedom of speech. They were talking about ending mass government surveillance, and they were talking about care for the poor. And basically, I've stayed loyal to all four of those pillars, more or less, and they abandoned them. So yeah. And like, I remember having a very vindictive mindset, but it was a very um, eye for an eye kind of sense. Like, for instance, I'll give an example. Like, I thought America deserved 9/11. So I know people are criticizing Hassan Piker for saying that and so on. And I get that now. Because one of the things that Hassan Piker is wrong about is that he claims the government of the United States does not represent the people. And I was like, okay, how does America deserve 9/11 if the government doesn't represent the people? Because it's the government and the CIA that are responsible for the bad things for the most part. The general public is not. And the only way you can justify harming the general public for the sake of destroying the CIA and the deep state and so on is if you think the people's will is being served by the deep state and the CIA, right? So that's the only reason why why I thought America deserved 9/11, because I was a true believer that we are a democratic peoples and the government represents us and, like all that propaganda and stuff like that, you know. And it's like, okay, you know, okay. You can chalk it up to some serious naivety and naivete and a little bit of a vindictive personality and so on. Now, I haven't lost this vindictive personality. I still believe in justice and harsh justice for true evil and so on. But it's not necessarily the most popular worldview ever. And I understand it because most people don't like to be harsh and so on. But at the same time, the more we learn about the left and the invading scumbags and their destruction of our people and so on, the more it's like we have to do whatever it takes to get these people out of power and out of our country. Whether by hook, by crook, by execution or deportation, by revolution, coup d'etat, I don't know what, something needs to happen to get rid of the left out of power at least, and get the invading scumbags out of our country on some level. There's too much bad behavior and so on. And it's not even like a matter of like just the fact that the invaders tend to be from barbaric civilizations or savage areas of the world. It's that we advertise we're going to punish them less harshly than their homelands, or we're not going to punish them at all because they happen to be from barbaric savage homelands. So, like, that gives them the impression that they can do whatever they want and suffer no consequences or penalties because they actually don't. And we advertise that we're not going to give them that either. If we implemented the same penalty for raping children as Pakistan, which is death, then would they even come here in the first place? And if they did come here, would they actually be doing that kind of thing, right? Like, that's the question. And this degree of being a fighting man who looks for evil and looks to destroy it and so on, although misguided in the past, has led me down this path as time progresses through experience watching the left and the invading scumbags do their thing in actuality, instead of just principles or theories or thoughts or a trajectory or if this continues it'll lead down this way but we're not sure because it hasn't yet kind of thing, and just watching it actually lead to those things more and more in actuality and so on, with the end result being total genocide of our people, basically. And like, we're not really that far along in terms of the steps required to get to genocide of our people. So it's like, okay, And one of the things that I've noticed is, all of this stuff was mentioned before by the ethno-nationalists, the white nationalists to some extent. And I've been thinking about it, and I'm kind of like, okay, well, they saw something in the left and they imagined a solution. And they were right about the left's direction, but they were wrong about the positions we should take entirely. Not entirely wrong, but they were wrong about the positions we should take in actuality. And they're inspirations for us today, but the difference between us now doing similar things to the white nationalists back then is we actually have the reality of the situation that we're witnessing, not the theory or fear or sort of like guesswork part of it done. And that means there's specific circumstances and situations and nuances that we address that they did not, and that's why we're in the right when the white nationalists were not, and the leftists were completely anathema to or against good things and so on. It should be noted that part of it is also that the left transfigured itself or transmogrified or transformed itself away from its original declared loyalties and so on into newer and newer formulations that had no bearing on the original setup or words or meanings or definitions or anything like that they originally had in the 90s and 2000s. So the conservatives or the right-wingers, and I mentioned this in the whole right-wing Hitler, Kanye West song, sort of humorous, putting the funny in the Austrian mustache man video. The right has a more nuanced view of the boogeyman of the right wing, historically, propagandistically, and so on. But it's maintained a relatively stable set of worldview, philosophy, and structure on some level. It's gotten a little more harsh in its declarations of what the left deserve, or a lot harsher, but it's reasonably accurate based on the situation on the ground as it develops, as far as I'm concerned. And it follows a worldview of right and wrong in different situations that is consistent, whereas the left is inconsistent, is not consistent. And That is one of the reasons why the right wing is going to win in the end, because the left is like Hydra and the right is like Shield, to use a Marvel analogy. Um, Hydra doesn't represent anything particular, except possibly subversion of everything, and Shield represents a solid core foundation that people can build off of, and so on, so to speak. I mean, I know it's a little cringe using Marvel, but that's what I would put it for. So that's Captain America versus the that computer entity in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Um, Basically, you know. And for a while, the left could capture this iconography and so on because it viewed the existence of a country being strong as the threat, whereas the country is only strong because it works well together. And the state, being the dominant set of society, is what the primary actual problem is, basically. Or maybe not dominant even, but like the true dominant factor of society. Because the state can remain dominant on some level, but we want it to be less dominant than the left does. And we want civil society and civic society and community to replace the state on more things from a genuinely localized native born population standpoint. So we don't want a lot of foreigners, we don't want a lot of outsiders. We want our people from our land, from our area, from our other people, like neighbors and stuff like that, to run society day to day for the most part, with the state being minimal and interfering minimally. And that is what creates a working society that works well, that's tightly bonded communally, naturally, without artificial laws saying you have to be nice to each other, or else we're going to throw you in jail for life if you don't use each other's pronouns. You know, like that kind of thing from the left. It's more like, hey, scoundrel, hey, pirate, how's it going? You know what I mean? Like, that kind of banter sort of between men is one of the things the left doesn't like as well. And, like, you know, it's kind of like the Han Solo and Lando Calrissian thing in The Empire Strikes Back when they first meet again. And, you know. So, yeah, we want to minimize the state and maximize community and so on, but we also want to keep most of the foreigners out. And that will destroy the left, as far as I can tell. And that is exactly what we want. I realize I might be annoying, I might be banging on the same drum over and over again and so on, but that's why I gave my credentials. Because I'm the kind of person who has faced violence and death and misery and agony and suffering and done the things that need to be done in bravery and effort and discipline to solve bad problems. And the particular way I've done that in this case is by fighting, as I've expressed before. And the other thing I do personally, which other people in my area kind of do as well a little bit, is we give charitably to the poor directly. And we give to charities that help the poor out locally and so on. And the government isn't very good help by any means, locally particularly, to be honest. they're just kind of wasting people's money and giving barely enough to get high constantly on drugs, but not enough to get a house or an apartment or something like that so you can live safely and freely, and you won't feel so miserable from homelessness that you turn to drugs in the first place, which is a constant occurrence and so on.